He was beheaded in Jerusalem in the year 44 AD. James, nicknamed Son of Thunder by Jesus, thus became the first martyr among the apostles. Written records preserved in ancient manuscripts tell us that his disciples carried the saint's body across the Mediterranean on board a ship, passing through the Pillars of Hercules and sailing on until they reached the westernmost limits of the known world. The coast of Galicia, that Finisterrae, the end of the earth in Latin, where only the lighthouse of Brigantium shone out through the murky night of the ocean, was to be their final destination. Guided by a star, they sailed into the estuary known today as the Ria de Arousa and up the Ulla River until they reached the town of Iria Flavia. Underneath the main retabule of the Church of St. James in Padron, there is a Roman altar dedicated to Neptune, the god of the sea, which according to tradition was used as a mooring post for the apostles' vessel. Other legends tell of how the saint's body left its impression on the first rock on which it was placed, as if it had been no more than a mound of clay. On their cross-country pilgrimage in search of the place designated by God to the apostles' final resting place, his disciples had to endure the hostility of those who still worshipped pagan idols. A noble lady known as Queen Lupa attempted to deceive them by sending them to the bleak slopes of Mons Ilicinos on the legendary Pico Sacro, with the promise that there they will find oxen they could use to transport the relics of the saint, although in reality the only animals there were wild bulls. When the queen saw the disciples return unscathed, escorting the cart bearing the apostles' body miraculously drawn by these wild beasts, she converted to Christianity and offered the disciples her family mausoleum located in Libredon Woods, as a place where St. James's body could be laid to rest with dignity. Hidden amongst the undergrowth, the apostles' tomb remained forgotten for more than 700 years, until a hermit by the name of Pelagius, alerted by the singing of heavenly voices, observed a star shining brightly above the spot in question. On hearing of this marvel, Theodomirus, bishop of Iria Flavia, at once made his way to this Campus Stellae, or Field of the Star, from which the city of Compostela derives its name, and identified the tombs of St. James and two of his disciples, Theodorus and Athanasius, inside the ancient mausoleum. With the backing of King Alfonso II, the bishop built a small church on the site, and order his own tomb to be built close to that of the apostle. During the archaeological excavations being carried out in the cathedral in the 1950s, the simple tombstone of this bishop was unearthed. It is engraved with a cross very similar in design to the lavish cross of angels donated by King Alfonso II himself to the Church of Oviedo during the same period. Just like the delicate classical cameos inset into the cross, the Roman mausoleum that served as the first monumental reliquary for the apostles' remains became encased like a precious gem in the architectural structure of the successive churches built by later monarchs. In 899, Alfonso III replaced the church of Theodomirus' time with a larger and more sumptuous building, which, as is stated in the records of its consecration, differ from the previous construction, which was made of mud and stone, in that it was decorated with marble slabs and other fine materials. Nothing, however, could anticipate the splendor of the Romanesque cathedral in which we find ourselves today. The first plans for its construction were made on a cold day in January 1075, when King Alfonso VI of Castile and Leon presided over a grand council held in Compostela, during which he handed over to Bishop Diego Peláez a large proportion of the 30,000 dinars recently received in tribute from King Abdallah of Granada to finance the project. The stone effigies of the founding king and bishop are carried up to glory by angels in two capitals that crown the triumphal arch of the chapel of our Saviour, commemorating the starting point for the construction of the new church. Building progressed swiftly from the ambulatory towards the western end under the driving force of the newly appointed Archbishop Diego Gelmírez. The transept, together with its two spectacularly carved portals, being finished in or around the year 1110. The Porta Francígena to the north, known today as Azabachería Portal, through which pilgrims who had traveled along the French route enter the cathedral, and the Platerías Portal on the south side, which leads directly into the city. The words of a person writing at the same time as the cathedral was being built, Aymeric Picot, author of the famous Pilgrim's Guide included in the Codex Calistinus, bear witness to the power of the building to elevate the spirit. This church has no cracks, no defects. It is magnificently built. It is large, spacious, light and airy, harmonious, well proportioned in its length, breadth and height, and of admirable and ineffable construction. It has two stories, like a royal palace. He who walks along the tribunes above the arches of the nave, though he ascends heavy of heart, becomes happy and joyful on contemplating the beauty of the temple. The spiritual joy that the cathedral instilled in pilgrims like Aymeric was enhanced by its capacity to transform itself into a veritable palace of memory of Western European culture. Just like the Sphinx that gazes enigmatically out over the city from its seat high above St. Faith's Chapel, the stone fabric of the cathedral contains numerous mysteries designed to encourage the visitor to plunge deeper into the spiritual and intellectual quest that lies at the heart of all pilgrimages. Pilgrims approaching the Apostles' tomb along the French route came to a square that bore the name of Paradisus, presided over, as the Pilgrim's Guide tells us, by the marvelous fountain constructed by Bernardus, the cathedral treasurer. In this urban setting where water reigns supreme, pilgrims could contemplate the first great facade of the cathedral, the Porta Francígena, with its portrayal of the creation, the fall, and the expulsion of Adam and Eve from paradise, and the announcement and the promise of redemption, which would find expression in the Platerías Portal, with its cycles dedicated to the Incarnation, the Passion of Christ, and the apostolic and evangelical mission of the Church. Many of the masterpieces that once belonged to this portal, torn down in the 18th century to be replaced by the current azabachería facade, were subsequently reused in other parts of the cathedral. These include the creation of Adam, in which God models the body of the first man with a delicate touch, reminiscent of the work of the artist who carved the granite to make it pulsate as if it were human flesh. Or King David, playing a viol whose sound seems to be expressed in the visual score formed by the folds of his robes as they rhythmically fall in descending waves. These figures, imbued with the emotive pathos and the carnality of classical art, were the vehicle for portraying on this facade not only the cosmogony of the Christian world, but also the mythical origins of Western culture. These are just some of the stories carved into the granite stonework of this palace of memory, erected on the very bounds of the world. When construction ended, over a century after it had started, the cathedral was consecrated in the spring of 1211, with the presence of King Alfonso IX. Entering with his retinue through the recently completed west front, the king would have undoubtedly halted in his tracks, left speechless and captivated by the work that crowns the Romanesque fabric of the building, which even Aymeric Picot himself had never lived to see finished. The stunning three-story narthex built by Maestro Mateo. This portico of glory is an artistic ensemble where architecture, sculpture and painting join forces to create a complete and overpowering vision of the story of redemption, providing a masterly culmination to the iconographic program carried out on the other two great portals of the transept. A stone is carved into a myriad designs, textures and gestures that transform our sight into a vehicle for perceiving the tactile qualities of matter and meditating on the passions that move our souls. Standing before this threshold, the pilgrim is able to feel the presence of eternity, with his eyes brimming with the images of the journey of a lifetime, with his hands sensitized to the textures of the road, and with his soul irradiating with the joy of having finally reached a homeland that welcomes us all, that of the spirit, culture and art.